Hey there, I'm Jessica Lauren Walton, and this is my interview corner. If there's a cool story in the security field or just something that I think is going to be valuable for my fellow professionals, then I want to talk about it. To learn more about the work I do as a writer, you can check out my blog at jessicawaltonwriter.com. Today's guest is Olivia Arnauts. If you were to open a dictionary and look up the term badass, you would probably find a picture of Olivia's face. All joking aside, Olivia has an inspiring story to share about her journey from military intelligence to the cutting edge work she does in private security today. She is also the co-founder of an organization dedicated to saving victims of human trafficking and helping them reintegrate into society. She has a surprising personal story that explains what motivates her to do this important work. So let's get in there and start talking to Olivia. Hey, Olivia, it's great to
Hello.
finally see you in
Yes,
semi-person and digital person after speaking on the phone. And
absolutely.
I know this is going to sound a little funny, but it's totally a compliment. I feel like you and your husband should be like on posters for a military recruitment campaign because
Thank you.
your story is so inspiring and just shows this very positive side of military service, with character development and also technical skills that you're utilizing now in your civilian life.
Yes.
And, there's so many things, so many other like types of PR around the military right now, like with PTSD or sexual assault, which are also important topics to speak about, but I don't think those should dominate
Yeah.
the
It doesn't
conversation about the
reflect,
military,
yes, it doesn't reflect the true, things that you can gain from military service. And I actually think, that we should require 3 to 4 years of military service. But that's just my personal opinion. But I agree that there's a lot of media that kind of wants to point out the issues, which these issues are all over the world and everywhere in corporate America
Right.
as well. But when it's being put out and there's not a lot of positive information and it can overpower the communication.
Absolutely. So, like I said, I think your story is really inspiring and goes very well with that motto of "be all you can be." So this is terrific. Just jumping in, tell me a bit about your background and what inspired you to join the U.S. military in the first place.
Okay, awesome. Yes. So I was one of those that joined as early as you legally can, which when I joined was 16 and 11 months, I think. And obviously you have to have your parents' consent, but I was one of those kids that graduated a little bit earlier than most of my peers. And I was living in a place that was just a very small town, 400 people population. I had to drive, 35 minutes just to go to school or get gas and groceries. And there
Mhm.
wasn't a lot of opportunity there. And I felt like a lot of people who stayed in my hometown didn't really have the lifestyle that I was hoping to achieve and kind of hoping to give to my future children. And so I always wanted to join the army. It was kind of my big dream. I do have a brother that's in the Navy, but not a whole lot of army around, and it was just kind of this passion that was just born into me. And so I enlisted while I was still in high school, and then left. And I was a 35 November, which is a signals intelligence analyst. Luckily, my uncle talked me out of being an MP because that wouldn't have been as much
What's
fun.
an MP?
That's like
I was
military
in the
police.
Israeli military, but not the American military. And now I work with all
Yeah,
these American military people in the defense industry in DC. And I'm like, oh my God, there's still so many acronyms. So
and
yeah,
they're different across everywhere. Yeah, every branch is even different.
yeah.
So that's military police. I
Okay.
had just the passion to really get into it. I didn't want to be bored. I wanted to be something high paced, something that makes a difference and like supports the community. But my uncle talked me out of it, made me go into Intel, which is great because that's what really created the opportunities in the civilian world for me. But I got really
Right.
lucky and they sent me to Hawaii. So I enjoyed the beaches. And that's where I met my husband, actually. So he's an infantryman. I was intel, but our barracks were right down the road from each other. Um, and it was, and I've told you this when we talked on the phone. It saved my life. That's how I put it. It gave me so much and so much opportunity. And jumping into mission at 17, head first, set the pace. And So a lot of people look at me and think I'm quite young to be, starting our own businesses, but I started so early that I was able to create my network and kind of get an idea of what I wanted to do. So long story short, I left the service after one contract because being dual military is difficult, especially when you have different jobs. It's hard to get you guys in the same place. And so I left because I had opportunity in the civilian market. My husband's an infantryman where skills don't translate quite as well. So he stayed in and I kind of followed him, went into corporate security and things like that. But I'll give it back to you unless you want to hear more about that.
Yeah. No, I have to say it's very inspiring to hear about someone from a young age who knew exactly what they wanted to do. And I think that's rare. A lot of us kind of were finishing up high school, even in college, like just trying to figure out what we want to do. But you were like mission focused from the beginning.
Well, I knew
So
college wasn't quite an option for me unless I wanted to be in a massive amount of debt, which I do have a sibling. See, I got lucky. I've got 4 and 5 older siblings who they took the journey first. And so I kind of watched what they were doing and how it impacted their life. And I was just looking at my brother who went through college and, he struggled with
yeah,
that and he struggled with, deciding exactly which path to take in college. And I knew that that wasn't right for me in that moment. And so the service was just like perfect, like they're going to send me
yeah.
around the world. They're going to teach me skills that I couldn't ever receive otherwise. And it was challenging. And I loved that aspect of it, that it's something that nobody had done before in, my female family. And I just wanted to be different. I wanted to try something that would challenge me and create a life of interest.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's great that I don't know if you were thinking when you were going to the military that I need to specifically get skills that will translate well into the
No,
civilian world, or no, you're just like, okay, but
no,
look,
I'm
you had a lot in order at a young age. But yeah, that's an interesting thing for people to consider
yes,
when
no,
joining the
that didn't
military,
cross my
where
mind at
they're
all.
going. Yeah.
I think often it doesn't. You don't even think about it, especially if you're joining from a service-minded aspect, because some people do join just to get the free college or just to get,
hmm
health insurance. But for me, it was I wanted to serve. I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to do something important. And so I went into it thinking I'd be there for a long time. I didn't imagine a career past my military career. I was just thinking
Right.
I want a military career. But the truth is doesn't work out for everybody. The lifers, it's just not meant for everybody. And so for me, I was really fortunate. I had an uncle who had already been in the service for quite a while, and he said, you need to get something that can translate, and fortunately, it did. But like my husband, for example, infantry. I mean, he can shoot guns and carry heavy stuff for a long time. And in the civilian world, besides being a police officer or other first
hmm
responder, there's not a lot of translation there. And so we kind of have to create our own space in the civilian market to use our skill set.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an important life lesson
Yeah,
for, Generation Z. It's like you have to have a lot of flexibility in life.
yeah,
It's like you have to be good at strategic planning,
yes,
but also, oh, I see a cat in the background.
yes.
That's so
I've got
cute.
two of my animals in here. Hope you don't mind. I
All
know.
right, we'll interview them next. I'm sure they have a
Perfect.
fascinating
Tell
life
me
story.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so yeah, but it's like you also have to be flexible because you don't know what life is going to throw at you, and also just figuring
absolutely.
out how to translate those skills, which
Yes.
segues into my next question, which is, and this is so pertinent for a lot of veterans. Let's talk about your transition from the military to the civilian world. What were some of the challenges you faced, and how did you handle them?
Yes, that is such a good question. And this is something I'm passionate about trying to serve other veterans because of. When I was transitioning, I was still pretty young. I joined at 16, and my contract's 3 years. I was still
Yeah,
I had a lot of freedom, but I didn't know what to do with myself. And one of the things they did have us do is create a LinkedIn, but they didn't teach us how to network with it. And we both know the powers of networking through LinkedIn, but you have to be strategic about it and you have to create a
right,
profile that shows your skill sets and what you're trying to do and the conversations you want to have. And I didn't feel like the transition period supported that. And especially, with my husband too, he just transitioned out in July of last year, medically retired. And
Mm,
it's just a pain, going through the transitioning your healthcare and trying to find a job and trying to find where are you going to live. And you don't even think about the fact that you've lived on base for, like, for example, for us, we lived on base the last 7 years. And then all of a sudden we live in a community that mostly is people who've never even served. And so it's a personality difference. It's it's the way you talk, it's the way you expect things from your neighbors. On base, it's like they're your husband's coworker or your wife's coworker. And so you just bond, each other and you support each other. But in the real world, it's not really like that. And so I think that was kind of a big shock for me. And I got to take advantage of my husband being a service member, and I was a dependent. And so I stayed home with my babies for a bit. But then I went into corporate security. And I think that that's where I found my place in the civilian world, because my coworkers are, prior Secret Service, prior Mill. And so we connected really well. And I felt like we had the same sense of humor and kind of the same self-discipline and drive, because you don't realize that a lot of people don't have that, and working with people that don't have those skill sets and self-discipline, it can be frustrating for
I get crazy. I can't work with people like that,
oh, I can't either.
full disclosure. That's yeah.
Exactly.
So in the defense industry where I work now,
Yeah.
it's like at least a third, military service members or veterans. And yeah,
It's a
I
different work
definitely
ethic.
it is, and I gravitate, towards
Yes.
that type of culture. But what you're describing, going from the military to the civilian world, it's definitely a culture shock, especially being a minority in this country.
Absolutely. Yes. And people just don't they just don't do it themselves. They don't put the effort in, they don't push hard. The motivation seems like it's lacking all of a sudden, because you're expected of so much in service, and you're going to be you're going to be self-disciplined,
Right.
and you're going to have respect. And it's just so different when you kind of jump into that space where not everybody's like that. And I think that's why veterans kind of get a bad rap for being mean or hard to get along with in the workplace, which always cracks me up, because I'm like, we're not mean, we're just joking, or
You're
we're
just
trying.
blunt. You're
Yeah,
blunt. You want to get the work done.
exactly. If you just did your job and maybe a little bit more, I wouldn't be mean. But especially like my husband, he's like, well, and he got selected for recruiting right before he got out, and that's really what started our transition fully, because he was like, no, I'm not doing this. Because he went from like an infantryman unit where they're all just tough, and it's you do your job, and if you don't, you're going to get in trouble for it. And there's just these expectations. And then he jumps into a recruiting position where they're all different jobs, and that was a culture shock for him. And he was the meanie and I'm like, he's like the least mean guy. He's just always joking, but you better do your job. And
Yeah.
that was a big culture shock for us.
Okay, so he's like a scary teddy bear.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm like, he looks tough, but yeah, he's like always joking, always wants to help people. He's like the most genuine guy you'd ever meet. But yeah, he has expectations if you're in a workplace, and it's like, no, people don't always fulfill that.
No, no, that makes sense. We'll have to talk on the side about, child rearing practices, because I'm sure that also,
Oh,
keeps your
yes.
home in tight order.
Absolutely. Yes. And my daughter starting kindergarten was a big shock for us, her going to class of kids. And it's funny, the teachers will blame like COVID, like, oh, they're the COVID kids. That's why they're so crazy. And I'm like, I think it has a little bit more to do with parents just not expecting or, teaching their children what respect
Hmm.
and manners are. And we definitely run a tight ship at our house. And I grew up that way as well. So I think that plays a part in it. But yes, we're like, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Open the doors. You do as you're told,
Yeah.
um, and our kids are wonderful. We love them.
Yeah. No, I hear that. You got to teach them boundaries, and there is something to be
Absolutely.
said for respecting boundaries and discipline at a young age. And people that I meet in from the military, they're not sheep. They're thinkers. They're very proactive people, but that's part of life. Is if you want to join a bigger cause, you
Well,
sometimes have to discipline yourself, to follow certain rules.
and you get more out of life when you're the most respectful one in the room. You get the opportunities given to you when you're the one that does say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, open the door, use your manners and do your job and be driven without having to be reminded. Those are things that will set them up for success in the future. And so that's why we instill it. And maybe we're the meanies, but we want our kids to be set up for success, and not be those kids that are calling the teacher names in the middle of class and disrupting because they've never learned not to. And so, yeah, we're pretty tough on that.
That's totally cool. I respect that. So you were just talking about, some of the kind of character development that you've received serving in the military. Let's talk about some of the technical skills that you received in your role in the military, and how are you applying them to the work you do today?
Yes. So, as I said, I was a signals intelligence analyst, which people are like, okay, what does that mean? I have no clue.
Right.
But anything that has a signal, a weapon system, a vehicle, a phone,
Hmm.
those kind of things, we would analyze and use that information to build, uh, you know, intelligence reports to support our troops, and no matter where they are in the world. And I think once I got to my actual position, when I was in Hawaii, I was really lucky, and it was more of an all source position, not just SIGINT, but it went more into open source intelligence, using linguists and things like that to really support the packages. And so it was a much broader view than it was just in training, which I really loved. That was where I kind of gained more skill sets than I was even assigned through my job. And that's what I use mostly now. So when I first transitioned, like I said, I went into corporate security. So I was doing global security and incident response for ExxonMobil. Eventually, I went to G4S, and essentially,
Hmm.
we're looking for incidents before they occur or as they occur, and we warn our people or our locations that something's about to happen and how to react to it. Whether we need to get security teams on it or responding to tweets that there's going to be a riot at this location, and we can kind of forewarn our people to avoid it. And so that was where I dove a lot more into the open source intelligence and how to monitor it, get ahead of it, really do the organic OSINT search is what I call it, because it's not like relying on a system or an app to do it for you. You're really going out and actively seeking out this information. And so after that, I went into private intelligence. We won't talk about that too much because it was an interesting company doing interesting things, but I didn't morally align. And so about a year after I was with them, I was like, I can't work for somebody that I don't agree with on just basic morals and how to treat people. And so my husband would be behind my computer just saying, just quit, let's make our own. And I love to tell the story that he drew on our mirror with my lipstick, us standing on an island and our boat's burning in the water. And he said the only way to take the island is to burn the boat. And so I quit my job on a Thursday. I'm like, I'm doing it. And so we started ZFIS, and we do protective intelligence, which, as you know, is just an intentionally vague term because it means a lot of different things, depends on who I'm talking to. I have some clients that need that proactive, preventative intelligence, threat, vulnerability, and risk assessments. I'm kind of looking at their team for insider threats, looking at their homes, where is your risk and how can we mitigate that? But other times it's like something's already gone wrong. So now we need to locate bad guy. We need to locate concealed assets. We need to figure out how to disrupt or dismantle or organized crime and support law enforcement and government, because we do support them and appreciate them. But we know that their resources are limited, and they continuously get cut, and they continuously, if we can hand them a packet that's cookies on the bottom shelf, here's bad guy, here's exactly what he's doing, here's the evidence of it, it supports their mission. And so that's kind of what I do now and how I use that skill set. I use all, open source intelligence. I look through docket alarm, dockets and looking for lawsuits and
I haven't actually heard of docket alarms. I'm learning
oh,
so much. Yeah.
yeah. So that's just a website. Honestly, you pay and you get access to legal filings as they're filed. And so imagine we have a bad guy that we know has done something wrong to somebody, but we can't prove it. And we need to prove that he has a history of transgressions or a history of illicit activity so that it's more likely that he did do what we are saying he did. And so I'll go and I'll search for any type of lawsuits or any type of criminal charges against this person to kind of support our
Hmm.
theory, and evidence that he's got a pattern of this behavior and most likely will continue. And that's those are one of the tools that I use. But I use like Reuters, Clear is one of my favorites right now. But that helps with, well, you have to have a license, at least I think a private investigative license,
Hmm.
and it kind of gathers information about people as a starting point for an investigation.
Yeah, in the Israeli military where I served, there is a unit. It is massive, called Shmonamatayim, and it's considered prestigious. Basically, it's a lot of OSINT, and before, it's just interesting to when I was studying security, right, at the university, it's before the Cold War, it was so hard to just kind of get any kind of intel. anywhere.
Absolutely.
But the
Yep. You don't have
challenge,
boots on the ground. Like, you
but our,
know,
yeah, and then our challenge today, it's the opposite. There's so much information that, you're
so much.
trying to separate the wheat from the
Absolutely.
chaff. So the people
Yes.
who serve in this unit, Shmona Matayim in Israel, they wind up becoming very marketable actually when they come out. We have a lot of high tech companies, especially in Tel Aviv, and just being able to manage this massive world of open source intelligence, just because it's open to everybody, doesn't mean everybody knows how to utilize it
Yes,
properly. Yeah.
absolutely. Or they don't even know, what's out there. And it goes to two sides where, yes, like you mentioned, the disinformation side, you need to know what you're looking at and if it's correct or not and how to source
That's
it.
a good point.
Yes,
Yeah.
because there's so much out there, and especially now with AI, we just saw a video this weekend of a person in one of those big blow up, balls that you can run in, and then there were sharks playing volleyball, and I'm like, there's certain people in the world that would see that and not realize that it's a fake video, and they would be like, wow, this is crazy, and that's a silly example, but it goes to wartime, it goes to security. Like, there's people that they'll start tweets, maybe there's a couple bot accounts that retweet it, and so it looks real, but you need to be able to discern if that information is correct or not. And then the other aspect of it is, are you putting information out without realizing it about yourself or your company or your
Hmm.
personnel that puts them at risk because somebody's accessing it through open source intelligence? And so those are the two sides that we deal with. Cyber privacy, your online footprint reduction, to make sure that you're not just telling the world all of your weaknesses as a company or as an individual, security wise, and patents and just things like that. People don't realize that's just out there and accessible.
Oh, that is a huge, huge issue today. And people don't think about, what they put out on social media. In a previous interview with Peter Warmka, he's a former CIA, and he was just saying how, like, yeah, he's like, LinkedIn's a great starting point for collecting information on people. Just going to any social media account. And I mean, that's just kind of scraping the surface. So it sounds like with companies, you guys kind of get hired as consultants. You drop in, you do like kind of
Yes.
just a comprehensive assessment, and then you start giving them actionable recommendations.
Yes, exactly. I'll go in with a
Hmm.
vulnerability assessment. I look at their team as if I'm one, a bad guy, and I want to attack them. I want to know how to get to their money, where their assets are, where their people live and work, and if they're kids, where do they go to school. If that information is out there, I'm going to gather it. And if they have a
Hmm.
team member that maybe they didn't realize has criminal charges, that maybe even sex offenses, they don't even know because they've never looked, and that's the kind of information I kind of present, and so that my client knows exactly who is supporting them and who is attacking them. But I also look at it from the perspective of, okay, I want to steal your clients, I want to steal your money, your brand, I want to impersonate you and trick people into donating money to me. That's a big problem for a lot of my clients, is they have these big personas, so people will pretend to be them, create false accounts, and then talk to their fans, get the fans to give them $1,000, and then they think it's going to the person that they the celebrity that they adore, and really it's going to this criminal. And so those are kind of, yeah, and then I'll give actionable steps. This is how we're going to mitigate this and prevent it in the future. And yeah, exactly, you're right.
Okay,
You're
red
everything.
teaming. So you're
Yes.
red teaming. Red teaming is
Yeah,
so much
exactly.
fun.
It's
Awesome.
like a weird combo, like it's like what, purple teaming, where you do a little bit of everything. And yes.
Okay, I haven't heard of that term, purple teaming, either. I'm gonna have to like write all these
Yeah.
down and look them up. I don't want to
Yeah,
slow you down.
I think technically purple team isn't a true technical, but it's basically just the combo of both, cyber related, or being proactive and then being defensive, and
It sounds right. Yeah,
yeah,
it sounds like a good term,
yes,
even if you made
exactly.
it up.
Perfect. Yep.
Okay, so and you have other veterans working on your team. Do they
Yeah.
have similar skills to you, or is it more like they're different but complementary?
Different but complementary. We
Hmm.
love the concept of having a diverse team, because if we all have our own specialties, we all stay in our own lane, but we can consult on a problem. We can
Right.
solve a problem when all of us have, different experiences. And so, like my husband, like I said, he was infantry, and then we have our board is made up of Lee Ogden. He was actually British military. And once he got out, he kind of made his name for himself in the US by developing the executive protection program with Halliburton, and now he runs some security businesses and the kindness games out of Mexico. So we have him as our business minded consultant, but he's also a security minded internationally as well as in the US, and based in Mexico, we're able to work a lot of projects that we didn't have eyes on beforehand. Then we have Mark Eckerd. He's the recently retired Command Sergeant Major of USACOM. He's incredible. I mean, we would soak in his knowledge every time he talks. And he still has experience, and he's still tied into the service currently. So we're still staying up to date in what they need and require for training and things like that. So even though we're out, we're still having connections within. And then last we have Alana and Dean Stott. Dean was also British military. He was SBS, which is like their special boat services, like our Navy SEALs in the US. And she is more, she helps, run businesses. She just launched her book, How to Ask for $1 Million, and kind of raises money for charity. And so they're totally different from us. We no similar knowledge, but we come together well as a team.
Okay, so it's like Captain Planet.
Yes, exactly. But I have a little bit of everything.
Well, that's fascinating. I did see on your website that you had other veterans, and I guess I just skimmed over it, so I didn't even realize that they were British military. So that's really a fascinating partnership that you guys struck up. Pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. We love the concept that, and especially, like I said to you, I find the Israeli military so interesting, so impressive. So I love talking to you about your experiences and your knowledge, and seeing how it compares and how it differs. And it shows kind of the strengths and weaknesses of both, and we can build upon it and create, a knowledge base that is incredible.
Oh yeah, it's so interesting to see the similarities and the differences, not just between the U.S. and Israel, but militaries from every country, because I think there are similarities across the cultures that, like, wow, that is really interesting. Kind of the discipline, the commitment to cause, being very mission focused. Some of the psychological or mental health issues are also very similar across militaries, but I'm not going to jump into that because that's a whole other conversation that I could talk about forever. And I want to focus on you.
You and I both talk about it.
Oh my God, yes. So we'll have another coffee date in the future to talk about that. Okay, so in addition to this business you're running, which again, that's impressive, on its own. And I mean, starting a business is so hard. Yes. But you're also the co-founder of the Relentless Revival Safe Haven, which is a nonprofit that helps human trafficking survivors rehabilitate and integrate back into society. So what was the inspiration behind the founding of this organization, and what are some of the activities that you're involved in today?
Thank you for asking. I will say, I say this as a forewarning, I'm still quite new to sharing my inspiration, my story, because it's kind of an ongoing, anybody who's gone through trauma knows it's a lifetime of healing. And so, but this is what brought my vision to, for this. And I think that it is important to share my why and where my heart is, so people can truly understand, exactly what brought me into this. Because I think there's a lot of, especially anti-human trafficking or anti-exploitation organizations that are actually there to exploit, or there to kind of pat themselves on the back rather than actually make a difference. But I think our mission is heart-driven, and that's what makes a difference. But while growing up in my tiny town, I fell victim to an online adult predator, grooming through social media, which is a big conversation for me right now, because I was an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old online with limited restriction, and I was talking to people I shouldn't have been because I was vulnerable to it. And that's just how women and men get into these places, is because they're vulnerable to that, and they don't know, maybe what it is or how the grooming process works. And I certainly didn't. And so after I was groomed through Facebook, it led to years of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse at the hands of an adult predator. I was one of many, unfortunately. But when I was about 14 or 15, his oldest victim spoke up and saved all of our lives, wrote out this list of girls that she knew he was abusing. I was on that list. And so that's when the police kind of got involved. I didn't know the criminal justice system at 14. So I went to the wrong state because I lived like 8 miles over a state border, testified, and then was told it didn't count. I'd have to do it again in another state. I couldn't deal with that at that time. So I chose not to. He went to prison, got a plea deal for everything because his victims were between 13 and 15 years old, and they just wanted to get it done with. So he got a slap on the wrist, served 10 years. So I joined the Army, 2 years later, never told my story again, moved on. I got married. I have children. And then 10 years after the fact, I get contacted from where I grew up, and he's being extradited over to the state I grew up in instead of being released and facing the charges for his crimes against me. And they told me at that time, if I chose to testify, he may get time, we might get lucky, but if not, he's walking out on time served. And so to me, that was like a big, first time I noticed how victim reliant the justice system is, because without my testimony, he was going to be free. And so I spoke with his other victims, and some of them didn't get out at 17, and they still continued on that path of, harm and unhealthy relationships, and never dealing with that trauma that we all experienced. And I hadn't dealt with it either. I just boxed it up, but I got out at least. So I decided to testify for 18 months straight. Every 30 days, I went to a hearing, and he was technically convicted on April 1st of last year. He waited a year to fight a clerical error. So we are back in court, and that's what's been going on for the last 3 months of my life. So that's been fun.
Oh my God.
But
Wow.
it just proves the point that, this is why victims give up and criminals get out to reoffend. And so and I honestly feel that this is kind of God's way of pruning me for my purpose, prepping me to be able to serve women who are dealing with the justice system and who are victims of trauma and who don't get justice, or who have a bad advocate, or who don't have the resources to continually show up to court every time. You have to miss a whole day of work. If you have kids, what are you going to do with them? And so this is really, it's been 3 years of trying to convict my child sex offender, where he pled guilty, failed a polygraph. I have, all of the forensic interviews from when it occurred, and it's still a battle every single time to get this man convicted. And so that's where my passion comes from, because I know what it does to a person when they are victimized or they've gone through trauma, whether it's combat trauma, whether it's childhood trauma, sexual trauma. Trauma is trauma, and it creates things inside you that you have to deal with and you have to heal from intentionally for the rest of your life. And so that's what brought me to create the Relentless Revival. I have the word relentless tattooed across my stomach. I have since I was about 17 or 18. And so that's where the name comes from, because I always say, like, you can't look in the mirror and see that written across your skin and then give up on life or give up on what you're trying to do. Like, it's in my body. And so the Relentless Revival, like you said, is a 501c3, soon to be long-term restorative care program. So we'll have 18 to 24 months of specialized therapy for trauma as well as addiction. We'll have animal-assisted therapy, art therapy, and then the biggest aspect that I think is important is the economic empowerment, where we'll spend time coaching them, career coaching, designing internships that fit their desires and their wants, and also connecting them through our network with organizations that will not exploit them, that will support them and create opportunities that they don't even think are possible or that they ever could receive. And so that's what my vision is for this. We are working to purchase land right now. So if you guys want to donate, go to the website. It's tax write-off, veteran owned and operated. But for now, what we do is the advocacy, the really dirty, ugly, hard work of arranging travel, arranging care. The system is not set up to support victims like this. And it doesn't, it's a painful process just to get help. Especially if you are addicted to drugs, especially if you don't have transportation or access to the internet. Like, if that is the victims we need to help, but that's the victims that the system is failing. And so that's kind of where we come in.
Whoa.
I know that was a lot. Sorry.
Oh my God. No, I'm floored. First of all, I'm just really honored that you're sharing that personal story with me in the first place. I can't even imagine what you've been through. And I was already so impressed with you before you told me this story, and I'm even more impressed because you're basically, you're kind of like a role model, that somebody who can suffer from trauma and at such a young age, and still go on to, have an amazing career, live a meaningful life, and have a wonderful spouse.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I think
oh yes,
that. So
that's
just
right
the
there.
way you're living your life,
Yes.
is so
That's
inspiring.
I just spent the weekend with an organization called All Things Possible. They run something called Samantha's Weekend, and it's a retreat, a weekend long retreat for women who've survived trauma. And this is my second time attending. You have to be personally invited, but they teach jujitsu, they teach personal self-defense, there's prayer. It's incredible. But one of the main things that we all said is none of us dreamt that we could have a healthy family unit. None of us thought we were ever going to find that true love or somebody that actually genuinely cares and doesn't hurt us, because a lot of us, that's all we've ever known. And once you go through trauma at such a young age, you become vulnerable to more trauma. You become vulnerable to becoming, putting yourself in positions that can cause harm to you. And I did it to myself a million times. I just recently shared a story of, just putting myself in positions that I look back now and I'm just, thank goodness I wasn't trafficked. I was lucky I wasn't trafficked, because I was in rooms where I should have been. I should have been trafficked. I'm lucky I left that alive. And I don't know. I give it all to God because I survived it. And I'm here now in a place where, like you said, I have a beautiful family and a beautiful life and have created these businesses. And now I can help other people and I can show them you can still be hurting and healing and still have a life you deserve and you want. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It never will be. It's always going to be a journey and you're always going to fight for it. And it's not going to be pretty all the time. But there is a purpose to your life and a purpose to your pain. And if I can do it, you can do it. Because I started with nothing and nothing but hurt and pain. And I built this. And so it's like, yes, I love that. And I try to remind people, like, I'm not perfect and it's not easy, but I'm doing it. It's an everyday journey.
Well, I think if you got one adjective to describe you, it would definitely be relentless. So it's good that you marked that,
I don't know why that word just stuck with me so young. 17, I knew it. My mom hates that one because it's like kind of gangster letters. I won't lie. And she's just like, really? Like, you had to choose that font? Like, what are you doing?
Oh, but so many people I know from the military have tattoos. Yeah. It is forbidden in Jewish religion to have tattoos.
Oh, yes.
So it's actually unusual. I wouldn't say impossible, but it is unusual to see the Israeli military with tattoos. You're more the minority in the Israeli military, but in the American military, I feel like you're definitely in the majority.
Absolutely.
And but I mean, most people, in all seriousness, are not as relentless as you, and it is extremely frustrating and heartbreaking to hear that these criminals, just by kind of playing the system and sticking it out, get away with it. And it's like, as somebody who has been victimized, it's almost like being re-victimized, having to go through this process in front of a court and tell your story. I can't even imagine. So I would say that there are a lot of women out there who are just lucky to be learning from you, participating in your program, because you obviously have the strength of a leader, and leaders go through difficult situations and they don't give up. They keep going. And I think that is another very important, life lesson to share with younger generations. So I also just thought it was interesting. I mean, just how comprehensive your program is. You're not just saying, okay, we need to help people escape, or we need to get people, trauma therapy. You're also saying, hey, look, these people are going to have a harder time finding a job. But, if you have become attached to somebody who's victimizing you, I can imagine if you don't have financial independence, that it can be it adds another barrier, I'm assuming, for leaving, right?
So that's how abusive relationships work. They control the money, they control your car, they control your job. And so when you come to a place where let's call it a rescue. So they get rescued or they leave and they go to get help. Now what? Now they have no money. They have no work experience. They've probably never opened a bank account. They don't have a driver's license. They may not even have basic education. And they're supposed to start a life like that. They might be addicted to drugs because their trafficker did that intentionally. They might have children with their trafficker. So their trafficker now has, I have your child. And for a woman, that's, can you imagine that your trafficker is controlling you with your baby? And you're supposed to just be rescued and then set free. And then it's like, okay, what is freedom? What am I supposed to do with myself? And then women get back into dangerous situations because they don't know how to do anything else. And so we looked at a lot of programs and, tried to look for that gap analysis, like what is happening that these women are going through programs sometimes, like 12-week programs or something, but then they just go right back to a life that's not what they deserve, and they don't know how to get a career. And so we think that longer term time where they have time to, you need to decompress, you need to do the mental health stuff, you need to do the therapy and the therapeutic counseling, and possibly detox off of drugs or whatever it might be. And that's another big gap, is a lot of long-term care programs require that women are clean for 30 days before they can even apply. And
that's probably a huge hurdle to begin with.
And I'm like, how are they, even if it's not their trafficker and it's just their last coping mechanism to survive the life that they're living, how can we expect them to get clean without help? It just drives me insane. And so that's a big thing that we want to be a little bit different with. And then after that, once they've had some time to decompress, once they've had some time to get out of that fight or flight, and into this healing space, then let's tackle the next problem. What are your passions? Like, what do you actually want to do? Because you can do anything you want. And it's like, they never had that. Nobody's ever told them that half the time. They think that, nobody in my family's ever done better, or I've never been told that I'm smart, or things like this, where they just need that empowerment and that decision-making help to find a life that they are going to be overjoyed with. And they're going to be able to build this legacy for themselves and their future children that they didn't even think was possible. And so that's what the important thing for me is I want this to be a long-term, restoration, not just, therapy for a few weeks or a ride out of your trafficker's house. Like, that's not enough. They need to be supported in a long-term way in order for there to be a long-term impact.
You could apply what you're doing to other models, like people who get out of jail, right? There's a high rate of recidivism because nobody wants to hire them. They might be on drugs or not, they might,
or just have charges related to it. And
they might have finished high school or not, and just trying.
And it's just because their family, or a lot of the times it's that generational curse where that's what they grew up in. And, we talk about human trafficking, and they say, if we could eliminate the buyers of sex, then we would not have sex trafficking, because there would be nobody to buy the women. And so they would no longer be, sellable. And, but it's like, you think about the men who are the buyers, or the men who are the traffickers, the men who are the drug dealers and this kind of thing. Where did they learn this from? Where did they decide that this is the life that they deserve? They want to be running around trying not to get shot and selling drugs? Probably not really in their deep soul, but their parents probably did it, or they probably didn't have parents the way that they should have, not supportive, loving parents, and they grew up in a place, in a way that they thought that's the life that they deserve, and they thought that that's normal and okay. So if we can adjust that, and like talking about prison reform, talking to young men who don't have a healthy male figure in their life, or they don't have religion, or they don't have whatever structure that they need to be able to say, I am worthy of a good life and I'm going to fight for it. And it does apply in a lot of different ways. And people just don't want to think about it like that with like prison. They get scared, like, oh, this person's done something bad, but maybe
there's all different situations. People come from all different situations. Absolutely. And yeah, if you want someone, to rehabilitate and to be able to integrate back into society, it's not like just a one-step process, as you're pointing out. There has to be a whole integrated program, and there has to be a community that is supporting you, which I'm kind of curious, how do you reach out to these women? How do they find out, about your program or services?
Yes. So we, for the last about year and a half, have been working really hard to network with organizations across the U.S. So when there is a victim reach out, whether it's through social media, they feel safe enough to reach out through Instagram DMs and say, I need help, I need to get out. Or there's a raid on just a strip club. What will happen is the police will go in, they'll arrest the traffickers. Sometimes the women are actually arrested for prostitution in certain states, because the police aren't at a place to understand that these women are being trafficked and they're not just prostitutes. But regardless, whether they get charges or not, they're taken to the police station, they've got to testify, they've got to do all of this stuff, and then they're kind of released, unless the police have a relationship with a program who they can reach out and say, even a text from a detective, hey, I have a woman who needs help, building those kind of relationships. Here in Houston, there's actually a program called The Pathway, I really, really adore them. They're so awesome. But what they're trying to do is create a referral program between law enforcement, medical facilities, and programs like ours. So whether a woman comes into the hospital with injuries from being abused or whatever, or she gets arrested or there's a raid, whatever it is, we can all talk to each other, get her the care that she needs, and then get her to a location where they have restorative care. Because honestly, there's been times where, for example, I had a victim reach out through a friend, and they knew me, they knew what I did. So they sent her to me, and I had to bounce her around from domestic violence shelter to domestic violence shelter. So she'd have a bed to sleep in and access to a computer so she could apply to long-term care. And the beds were full. I mean, they're full all over the place. I had to get her driven 2.5 hours south just to have a bed for the night because all of the beds are full. And it's heartbreaking. And it's like in these domestic violence shelters, the women are fighting, there's stuff getting stolen, there's traffickers stalking the building, and they don't feel safe. They feel triggered, and they feel that fight or flight. I'm not safe here. I'm not being protected. They're not serving me or wanting to help me. And they go and they fly and they disappear. And so that's where the really, we all need to work together so that when this happens, it doesn't take 4 weeks to get them a bed. It takes a second because we find them a bed where there's a bed and we all talk to each other. But it's like this weird, like not a lot of people want to come together in the fight. They kind of want to do their own thing. And so we're trying to kind of create that relationship and community as well, because it's like we're all on the same team. Like we should be fighting together. It's not about who saves them or who gets the pat in the back. It's about actually supporting women for long-term, restoration. And that's how we feel about it.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of, cause-driven organizations out there that compete with each other when they really should be collaborating. So I think it's excellent. I mean, geez, you really just have like you are a very bird's eye view, comprehensive thinker. And
myself gives me that view, and that's why I'm grateful for it. I'm trying to, learn to be grateful for it, because I couldn't possibly have that bird's eye view if I hadn't experienced the pain and the troubles of trying to build my life, trying to have something like this that I didn't think was possible. And it's, I know how painful the process can be. So I'm like, we need to consider these things. And I really do wish it would just be like one team, one fight. Like give me a call if you need help in my area and I'll help. But it's not so much like that all the time. There's certain orgs that are incredible. Yes. Like there's a lot of amazing ones, but there's also some that just make the process more difficult, really.
I think because they're not seeing things from ground level. And so they're not, implementing activities or policies that are practical. They're just saying, hey, it sounds good to me. But you're somebody who's like, hey, we can't afford that because I know what it looks like from ground level.
Absolutely. Yeah, you see, or like I'm saying that with the drugs, how can you be a restorative care program, but you won't accept a woman who's detoxing from drugs? Aren't those the women that need the help? And to me, it just drives me insane where, or they'll say you can't have a mental health condition. You can't have any medications for mental health. And I'm like, what? Who are you helping?
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait.
Yes,
come again. You're going to be disqualified from a program if you're on mental health medication?
There's certain
Are you joking?
that I know of that screen women before they can even accept them, and they ask them if they have any mental health issues that are medicated. And if they're medicated, then there's certain organizations that say you do not qualify for my program. And that blows my mind.
Whoa, that is appalling.
The network, isn't that the community that we should be helping? Like they are the ones that need our support. But it's just like they just want to do what's actually easy, and they want it to look pretty, and they don't want it to be, messy. But that's what restorative care is. It's going to be messy and difficult and hard.
Wow, that really is unbelievable. And look, I think what I'm also impressed by what you're saying is that you do have this awareness of the bad things going on. I mean, it sounds like there's still this struggle, putting away the man who attacked you and other women, really putting him away, which I can't imagine, being able to fight.
Poor girls. He will get out and he will do it again. Because
right. And it sounds like that's what keeps you going
that
with
is,
that.
100%.
Absolutely.
It's not, I try, I try not to think so much, or I don't think so much about my own personal justice. It's just thinking about, I know he's a repeat offender who served multiple prison sentences for multiple victims, and he will do it again because there's something in him that is wrong. And I know if I give up, even though this, this has been the most, I actually say it's like intentional torture for the last 3 years, because they've delayed it at every step. They've denied
Wow.
it. They've failed to, at one point the judge was asking him to apologize. This was at sentencing, and he was saying so much horrible stuff that the judge told him, you have to stop talking or I'm going to add more time, because he could not just take responsibility. And I wanted to be able to forgive him and say that he served 10 years. You would think that he'd have remorse by this point, or he would be, he would have to be changed and be ready to go back into the world, but he's not. And it's shocking. I was not expecting it. And so now I'm like, I cannot give up, because he will do it again. And then that will be on my conscience. And I can't live with that. So I'll be here I'll be there on August 30th.
Wow.
August 31st is my next hearing. I thought this last Thursday would be my last hearing. I show up and they're pushing it out till August. So
Oh my Lord.
like,
No,
for
that's
what? For what
terrible.
good other than trying to get me to give up? That's it.
Yeah,
And
no, that's just so aggravating. Thank God that you have so many other sources of strength in your life, including your
yes,
family, to like help you keep going, because like we
absolutely.
all
Not
we
everybody
all
has.
need a foundation, you know?
Yep. And the
And
women who don't have this, I don't know how they could do this. I could not do this without my husband, who is the most supportive man in the world, without all things possible that have offered restorative care and therapy and prayer for me constantly. Like, I have so much support and resources because of just, where I'm at right now with my businesses and my network, but not everybody has that. So it's like, I want to be that person that can reach in
yes,
and give these women this, because I would not be here. I wouldn't live through this without this support that I have. And I'm so fortunate, because I know so many women who just don't have it. And I can't imagine, going to a hearing every 30 days, facing your abuser and looking at them while they deny it or they gaslight you, in a hearing, and then
wow.
having to deal with that alone. That's unimaginable.
Yeah, I mean, that's an unfortunate reality in our world. That's just hard to comprehend as a human being, that there really is evil out there and it can be strong. And that's why our response to that has to be strong or stronger. So
Yes.
wow, I'll be praying for you. I hope everything works out. I hope you're successful in those very important endeavors. So just finishing up, I want to hear from you. What is your message of hope for somebody who is suffering with trauma and is in a dark place, just doesn't see any tomorrow? What is your message to those people?
Oh, that's such a good question. And honestly, that's been a big, this last weekend that I just spent at that retreat, that's all we talked about, is that finding that hope and finding that way to, it's not going to be easy and it's going to be painful. And especially healing is painful. You've got to bring things back up and actually address them and put them in the right spot in your mind and in your heart and in your soul, to actually have the life you deserve and you need, to find that joy again. But it's possible. And this one song I really love, it's called Joy in the Morning. One of the lyrics that says, giving into your feelings is like drowning in the shallows, and just finding a way to say that there is purpose in my pain, and I'm going to be able to serve others, or I'm going to be able to create a project or support a project in a way that nobody else can. My personality and my strengths and my knowledge is special and unique because of what I've been through. And so that's for every trauma victim. What they've experienced can help somebody else not go through what they did, or help somebody else recover from what they did. For me personally, my trauma, I think a lot about, I'm not on social media at all. My kids will not be on social media at all because of what, I was
Yeah,
victimized through it. And so many women are, so many men are, kids. Roblox is terrifying. You know what I mean? Like, that's where it's sitting. Kids are sitting ducks to predators online. And I'm able to see that because of what I went through. And so now I can save kids. I can help them know how to protect themselves from predators. And without having gone through what I did, I couldn't have. And so just finding that purpose and finding that ability to say, no, I'm actually thankful for what I went through because it's given me this ability, is how you can find a way to be happy, to be able to achieve, just peace. And that's what a lot of trauma survivors don't have. They don't have that peace. They don't have that joy. or that ability to be comfortable with who they are. And so just being able to find those is my biggest message, I think.
I think that you exemplify this message of,
The process.
life. It's a process. Everything is a process for sure. And you got to be able to push through it. But that, life can be really hard. There can be a lot of suffering. But if you find meaning and you find a cause to attach yourself to, you can still be a very happy person, despite the suffering in your background, and
Yes.
thriving and
It will give you
thriving.
passion. It will give you insight. Like it's a blessing. And it feels like a curse, but it's really a blessing.
Amazing. Olivia, thank you so much. I just enjoyed speaking to you so much. I'm really inspired by your story. I wish you so much luck with all this valuable work that you're doing, and I'm looking forward to being in touch.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to more conversations, and we'll have to talk more about, the after effects of serving and how people
Yeah.
deal with that, because that's a whole nother story in itself, like you said. But thank you for letting me share my story and getting this word out, because somebody will listen to this, and I hope it will give them hope and, give them some inspiration. And that's kind of like why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I do. So I value any opportunity to do that. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Olivia. Have a great week.
You too.
Bye.